Welcome back to Sunrise on this Hope Day Wednesday. As we continue this morning, sign language will soon become South Africa's 12th official language. Well, good news is that the Parliament's Constitutional Review Committee has recommended it to be given official status. To talk more about sign language to be the official language, we are joined in studio by Judith Madi from Deaf South Africa with her interpreter Mpho Teme, and we'll also be joined a bit later on by Pan South African Language Board Chief Executive Officer Dr. Munaring. Remember, you can be part of our conversation by giving us a call on 011 447 1742 or 011 447 1620 to share your comments, your experiences with us as well, and we'll also be looking at your Facebook. And we had a poll on our Twitter page as well, so we'll share that with you. Now, good morning to you, Judith. Thanks for joining us, and Mpho as well for interpreting for us this morning. So this conversation around sign language becoming a 12th official language in South Africa, what does it mean for the deaf community in South Africa, and what do we need to understand?
South African Sign Language, it's going to be the 12th official language, and for the deaf community it's going to be a big celebration, because without South African Sign Language there is no communication for the deaf people, and it is also part of their rights, because so far it hasn't gained its official status, and deaf community have been struggling for a while in terms of communication. So once it gains its official status, everything is going to be good, free, and which means deaf people will be able to access every human rights that they want to access.
Okay, so we also, I've just been informed by producers that we're joined by Dr. Mpho Munaring, who is on the line, couldn't make it in the studio. Good morning to you, Dr. Munaring, and thanks for joining us this morning. So just basically explain to us, what does it mean that the deaf language will become official? That process that led to this moment, what do we need to understand?
Firstly, we're kind of glad that this has happened. It's long overdue. It means that giving the sign language community speaker a platform to use their language in an official platform. And it means that they will be part of knowledge construction, education, and the like, that they could be able to speak in the same way. What also that's going to be happening is that after this announcement, this needs to be followed by a constitutional review. That's something that has to do with parliamentary processes. But it's quite pleasing, and it's much about giving people their linguistic human rights. That's very important. It's one of the kind in the world, I guess.
Okay, so when you say that there's a constitutional review, what does that process exactly entail?
Let me start where it began. We were called to this Constitutional Review Committee as stands up to come and state and give motivation whether we would need to include the sign language and to see if it can be included, resulting into a constitutional amendment. We went there, we made presentation, they've got their presentation, it's accepted, and now the second leg is the letter that came out to indicate that they are now in processing and making sure that this language is going to be official. So the next step is the Parliamentary Constitutional Review Committee that will be able to change the Constitution. Remember, currently the Constitution is stating that it's only 11 official languages. So it must officially go through the process so that we include the 12th language.
Okay.
Official language.
All right, now Judith, just share with us the difficulty and challenge that a deaf child in South Africa, the impact of the language not being official has had on their life, access to education, access to information. How has that impacted South Africans, and how would this decision change that?
Okay, thank you. Deaf children, you know well that South African Sign Language, it is our language. So for a deaf child, it is very important, because a deaf child needs to learn in their own language for them to access communication. If South African Sign Language is available, it will be an easy access of information for a deaf child. Because right now we do have deaf schools, and currently made the curriculum that was approved in 2015, curriculum of education for SASL, this as a subject, SASL as a subject. Because it was a big achievement, because right now it's easy for the deaf child to access or to learn in their own language in the schools, which is their right for the deaf children. And also it's the same as a spoken language. So which means it will make a free life for them, and it will be easy access for them. Because, for example, in my times, I didn't have South African Sign Language as a subject. So I'm happy for the upcoming generation that their lives will be more accessible in future if sign language becomes the 12th official language.
Now, Dr. Monaring, in terms of like official, institutions like, from government to corporates, and in terms of like universities especially, I was reading somewhere that for university students, it's quite a challenge really to access some of the courses that they'd like to to follow through in their lives. So the process of making sure that institutions adhere to this in the long run, what is the plan towards that?
Firstly, it's a question of, do we want to do it? If we've indicated that we want to do it after this announcement, then we have to make sure that it works. Firstly, they need to be, currently the University of Free State is offering the sign language courses, which is basically one of the kind in the country. What we need to do is to start with teacher training, ensure that there is a curriculum meant to teach people on how to sign and how to learn through sign language. The next thing would be the schools. The Department of Education must make sure that it extends its platform to make sure that in the curriculum we do have a curriculum specifically meant for the sign language community speakers. Schools should be available, and that basically is supposed to be mandatory. It's not going to be a question of a choice. I understand that people are going to be worried much about or complaining much about whether we do have resource and the budget, but we know that budget is human-made. It's something that is done by human beings. We can make sure that we bias towards this move, which is quite important. And the other important aspect is looking at the orthography. The current orthography or the signing tablets that they have need to include speakers, the sign language speakers who are in the rural area. Because if it is only incorporating people who are in the urban area, then it's going to be leaving other people outside the margins. Remember, the rural area, you might find that there are lots of people that do not attend school, and they might not be exposed to the current signing kind of tablet that we have.
Okay, as my pen drops there. Okay, Judith, in terms of making sure that this process is adhered to and there's compliance, and finally, every deaf South African feel that the marginalization that's been happening in the past is dealt with, what is Deaf South Africa going to be doing?
Now, going forward, DEFSA will make sure that all the deaf community's rights are met, and will continue to lobby for the deaf human rights, because DEFSA have been for a very long time lobbying and making sure that the priority of the organization is the deaf community, and the deaf community's voice is being represented, so that we stand for the deaf community's rights, and to make sure that the deaf and the hearing, they learn sign language. So once South African Sign Language becomes an official language, we are going to be real happy, which is we're hoping that very soon it's going to be an official language. Once it's official, DEFSA will continue to play the role. Already we are playing our part, but moving forward, we'll continue playing our role that we've been doing so far.
All right, Dr. Monaring, another question is in terms of obviously the institutions will have to comply and make sure that there's access, to sign language. But if I want to pursue a specific career and specialize, how are those things going to be dealt with?
As I have indicated, the University of Free State is offering courses in sign languages. So basically, it's to register, apply and register and become one of their students. And basically they need to increase the intake so that it can cover the need of South Africa. So currently we can use that as an epicenter in South Africa, and we extend that to other institutions of higher learning, particularly in the teacher training programs, because that's where we need to increase the skills on how to teach. The methodologies and approaches that need to be used are basically important that we need to inculcate at the universities.
Okay. All right, Judith, from Deaf South Africa's point of view, for general South Africans, how can they contribute to making sure that this, is achieved successfully and it helps the deaf community? What is it that other South Africans can do?
We, DEFSA, we are already working very well because we have made a submission to the Parliament and will continue to make sure that South African Parliament implement what we have requested as our submission. So as we continue, we'll also continue to encourage and also to fix, to make sure that South African Sign Language becomes an official language. And also, we're expecting that hearing people will make sure that they support and make sure that we teach them so that they can be able to support our own language. Because they have their own spoken language, but then what about South African Sign Language? So they, as much as you have learned spoken language, so we are expecting that South Africa, as a free country, that everybody has to accept our own language. Deaf people have always been behind and marginalized because of a language barrier. Once South African Sign Language becomes an official language, so everything with regards to the deaf community will be free. And the aim of DEFSA is to lobby more, continue to lobby for the language to be promoted and to be part of the South African community.
Okay, well, let's talk to Dr. Mararing and wrap things up on the line. What is the next process going forward? What do we need to understand going forward, Dr. Mararing?
The review of the Constitution is key because it functions and give the direction of how we're going to be doing. So we leave that to Parliament to complete its processes when it comes to the amendment of the Constitution. But basically, it doesn't mean that we need to stop. It's basically much about going on. The announcement has already been made. If it's made, it means that we should go on, because currently there are institutions that are taking this quite seriously, and we cannot just keep on waiting for a long time. It's official, it's official.
Okay, well, we'll have to leave it at that. Doctor, thanks very much for joining us on the line.